the Americans have traditionally been a source of security as far as the Gulf monarchies are concerned. And the Gulf monarchies, in turn, supported the US's strategic projects in the region and also ensured the smooth flow of petroleum. I think much of this is today outdated. The only people who haven't understood it so far are the Americans.
Welcome to the Gist on StratNewsGlobal. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan and welcome to another edition of the Gist. India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was in Saudi Arabia for talks with his counterparts from the US, Jake Sullivan, the UAE NSA, and of course his Saudi counterparts. They discussed backing infrastructure projects in the region as a counter to China's Belt and Road initiatives. So let's turn to my guest for this evening, Talmiz Ahmad, former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, an Arabist and a well-known scholar who studies the region very closely. So welcome, glad to have you.
Thank you very much, Surya.
So this plan for a railway line, that's what we are getting from this meeting of NSAs in the last couple of days. There's talk of the US using Indian expertise to build a railway line. And it reminds me of the Berlin to Baghdad effort, in the early 1900s. So can you throw some light on this? Exactly what is the US looking at? What is the plan here?
I'm glad you have mentioned the Berlin-Baghdad railway line. This was a railway line that went from Berlin-Baghdad and then came to Basra. And then in the beginning of the last century, the Sultan of Oman also had a railway line which went from Istanbul to Iraq, went to modern day Jordan, and came into modern day Saudi Arabia to carry pilgrims. And this pilgrimage line which came up to Medina. And this was the line that was destroyed during the First World War under the instigation of Colonel Lawrence of Arabia, as he was called later on. Yeah. Then for a very long period, there were no railway lines in the region. But over the last 2 decades, railways have become a very major initiative all across the Arabian Peninsula. So there are, number one, a large number of national projects, and there are a large number, and there is a plan to connect all the 6 countries of the GCC. There has been tremendous progress already. So there is a kind of misleading remarks that have emerged from that briefing from Washington about this meeting of 4 NSAs, that there is going to be an initiative to put up railways all across Arabian Peninsula, and it is also stated that this was an idea from the then Israeli Prime Minister in 2019. This is completely absurd. For more than 15 or 20 years, the Gulf countries have been looking at railway projects. Do recall here that Saudi Arabia has already completed the railway project connecting the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. This is a high-speed railway system. They had in 2010 in Saudi Arabia prepared a 30-year plan for the development of railways. They would have about 10,000 kilometers and it would cost about $100 billion. My understanding is that already within 10 years, more than a third of the project is completed. It has involved upgrading some of the existing facilities and putting in place certain new facilities. Also, I must mention to you that there are very substantial railway projects all across the Gulf countries. So there is one major project from Muscat up to Kuwait, linking all the areas of the Gulf, and also there is going to be a line from here up to Bahrain, so crossing the creek. So I am a bit mystified. They also speak of interconnectedness between India and the Arabian Peninsula. With all respect to my American brethren, India and the Arabian Peninsula have been connected for 5,000 years. And we
Absolutely.
are all aware of that. We are conscious of it. And in fact, our modern day connection with the region is in fact uninterrupted. There
Yeah.
has been no break in this connection. There is a mention in this readout from Washington that there is going to be a connection of ports all across what they call the Middle East and India. Excuse me, India is so deeply connected in terms of shipping facilities. We buy much of our oil from the countries of the Arabian Peninsula. We have a major movement of Indian trade right across the Red Sea from Bab al Mandeb. We have going all through Bab al Mandeb through the Red Sea. So I am not able to figure out what they are talking about in terms of promoting connectivity. We already have very significant connectivity. Now there is a mention of that this is likely to compete with the Belt and Road. This is
Yeah.
pathetic. The Belt and Road has been in place for about 10 years. We all have every country of West Asia, including Israel, is a part of the Belt and Road initiative. Each of them is seeing how they can fit in. Certain existing projects are being made part of Belt and Road initiative. The Americans have just arrived on the scene from very recently as far as logistical connectivity is concerned. We've already gone very far ahead in this regard, and I can't see any scope for competition as far as Belt and Road is concerned, because all the countries of the region are members of it and are participating in it.
So, is this an American effort to get back into the game in the Arab world? They've been distancing themselves from
You
that
see, the
region for some
point
time.
is, at one level, it appears to be what you said. The Americans had given the indication of disengagement from the region. And
Yeah.
that has been going on for several years. And the region also had got increasingly fatigued as far as the Americans were concerned. The Americans have traditionally been a source of security as far as the Gulf monarchies are concerned. And the Gulf monarchies, in turn, supported the US's strategic projects in the region and also ensured the smooth flow of petroleum. I think much of this is today outdated. The only people who haven't understood it so far are the Americans. They speak in terms of disengagement, but overall, I would say to you, the region has moved on. It doesn't need the kind of traditional security guarantor. I would also say to you, I would be very skeptical with regard to the kind of security the Americans gave to the region. Recall here that many of their initiatives in the region were against the advice of the region, particularly the war on Iraq in
Yeah.
2003, which caused such great instability. In any case, for a variety of reasons that have emerged over the last decade, the region has moved on. And the language that is coming out from the region, the sources are several. Disenchantment from the Americans, with the Americans, a kind of self confidence that has emerged, a kind of shaping of a diplomatic agenda by the region itself to support its own interests. All of this has been happening over a period of time, and we've observed it and we've commented on it. The Americans seem to have been taken by surprise when the Chinese stepped in and brokered a peace agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So much
Yeah.
of the scurrying around that you see nowadays appears to be a knee jerk reaction to this initiative. But may I remind my American friend that this initiative is the culmination of several things that have happened in the region in the recent past, and and it reflects major changes within the region itself with regard to its own foreign policy and pursuit of its national interest.
So let's look at some of these major developments. I think the other day, Syria was readmitted into the Arab League. There have been other developments also, which the Arabs themselves have initiated, isn't it?
Absolutely, you are right. The most important has been the engagement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It had begun in April 2021, and through 2021 you saw 5 meetings taking place.
Yeah.
The last meeting was in April 2022. So 5 meetings took place in Baghdad. I understand there were 3 other meetings that also took place in Muscat. So there was a pursuit of the agenda, the security interests of both sides being discussed by their security officers bilaterally. So this was a major progress. For various reasons, the format relating to Baghdad could not be continued. There was a degree of political uncertainty in Iraq. Then you had the change of government in Iraq as well, and you found that the Saudis were less comfortable with these changes. So you had some of these changes. In December 2022, when Xi Jinping visited Riyadh and had the 3 summits in Riyadh, at that time you saw that there was a request from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to the Chinese leader to broker a kind of convening of meetings between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And he agreed to do this, and that is why on 10th March you had the Beijing Accord announced to us publicly. This was the first initiative. Separately, quite quickly flowing from this, the Saudi delegations have been to Yemen and have talked to the Houthis for the first time. You have seen pictures of this. There has been announcement about relating to the first phase of the truce. And you know, this peace arrangement in Yemen did not start just now. It's been in place for more than a year, and it has held. There is no fighting going on in Yemen these days. They have not resolved their differences, but they have agreed to a truce. It's a very broad arrangement. It talks about there not being any further conflict, that there will be certain engagements, certain displaced people will be looked after, health arrangements will be put in place, etc. So that you have that. Yemen has been a second area. You have the readmission of Syria into the Arab League that happened just a few days ago, and that is the third area. And quite apart from all this, you have had Turkey engaging with the major Arab countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and attempting to normalize relations with them. Now that you have the Beijing Accord, the separate American initiative to build a military coalition against Iran, I think that has been more or less killed. I don't think it has any future. The Americans haven't given up. It is extraordinary that soon after the meetings of the 4 NSAs in Riyadh, Jake Sullivan went off to Israel and has been talking with the Israelis about normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. There is a kind of unreal world that the American diplomacy has created for itself, which has no relation with reality. Look at the functioning of the Israeli government on the one hand, extreme right-wing government, extremely violent, extremely non-accommodative, not reaching out to the Palestinians on any issue whatsoever. And yet you have the Americans, instead of counseling moderation in Tel Aviv, they are talking about normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel as a priority initiative as far as the Biden administration is concerned. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
So now let's look at what India is doing in this. NSA, Ajit Doval was there. What is the game plan here for us?
See, to the
What do we hope
extent
to achieve
I have
here?
understood what we are seeking to do in the region, my understanding is that the kind of approach we had to West Asia has continued. That our approach used to be transactional and bilateral. By transactional, I meant that there has to be a mutual give and take in the engagement, And bilateral, I mean that it is confined, the relationships and engagements are confined country wise. There is no regional approach to West Asia or to the Gulf as far as Delhi is concerned. So, whenever we talked about a strategic role for India, a role in terms of which it would promote stability, I think that we were completely wrong. India has no interest whatsoever in approaching the region as a whole or and taking advantage of its assets, pursuing a peacemaking role in the region. It appears it never took this initiative seriously and it has no plans to do so now. So I would say to you that it is not as if China elbowed India out. India never got into the ring. If I would say to you, frankly, that if India had taken a serious approach, our credentials are extremely substantial and extremely solid, and they would have been appreciated in the region. I can tell you frankly from personal experience that a large number of policy makers in the region had approached me for several years saying that why doesn't India participate in the promotion of stability in the region? It has such extraordinary diplomatic credentials. And I wrote at least 6 or 7 academic papers on this subject. I made presentations at the National Security Advisory Board and the National Security Council Secretariat urging that India is well qualified to do something about it. But India is not interested. And my own understanding is that in Mr. Modi's second term, the focus of the government and the priority of the government is to reshape the idea of India at home, and foreign policy therefore has taken the back seat, and there is no serious attempt being made to frame a foreign policy that would be part of a larger vision and game plan to promote India's profile and its role in various parts of the world.
So this is entirely fixated on energy, isn't it? If you're talking of our relationship with the Gulf states, with Saudi Arabia and others, it's largely fixated on ensuring the guaranteed supply of energy
Well,
and
I
nothing
think
more.
what we have done, as I have understood it, is that the political engagements that the Prime Minister led to the region and which were very warmly reciprocated by
Yeah.
all the capitals across West Asia, the end result has been to promote India's economic engagements with the region, going beyond energy, going beyond trade into the areas of investments and joint ventures. That means there is a very strong and substantial corporate element in the relationship. And if I can be somewhat extravagant in my remarks, I would say that instead of pursuing a strategic role in the region, which has to be government led, what we have done is we are using our assets to promote a corporate role rather than a strategic role. And that is where we are today. So a large number of our companies are looking for opportunities within the region to see how we can take it forward, our ties forward, and at the same time, these countries are looking for investment opportunities in India. The political, security, and strategic element of relationships, that is the responsibility of government, that is not in the picture as far as I can see.
So what explains this reluctance to get involved there? I mean, this is not new. It's always been the case, isn't it?
Well, earlier we could not be involved in West Asia because the Americans didn't allow anyone else to come in.
Yeah.
It is from 2010, 2011 onwards where you start sensing America's fatigue. America had got itself into Afghanistan and Iraq entirely on its own,
Yeah.
without any long-term game plan, without any vision or strategy, without the garnering of appropriate assets, and without setting up a time frame. Therefore, it became a long-standing involvement because you had no game plan and you had no vision about where to stop and what to achieve, you kept going on. For about 20 years, 2 decades, you continued to remain in the region, but without any end in sight. And then you saw what happened. The withdrawal from the region was an embarrassment not
Yeah.
only to Washington DC but to the region as well. On television, we saw how the Americans packed their bags and ran from Kabul and left the country, their own citizens, their own friends, all the women of Afghanistan at the mercy of this enemy they had fought for 20 years. They gifted the country to the Taliban because in their haste they had to get away. So there was already a deep sense of fatigue as far as the United States is concerned, and that fatigue has meant that they had no game plan either with regard to Afghanistan or with regard to Iraq. The region itself has become extremely unstable and insecure because of this. I had hoped that from 2010 onwards, as American fatigue and disengagement first became apparent, we would step in. You would remember that Hillary Clinton spoke of the pivot to Asia, indicating that the principal competition the Americans would face would be across the Malacca in the South China Sea and the East Sea, basically in the West Pacific. And already I could sense from 2011 onwards that an opportunity for India has emerged. So, yes, I do believe that India could have taken advantage of these opportunities, these openings, and possibly work towards regional stability, perhaps not on its own, perhaps bringing in as partners other Asian countries which have a similar interest like India in regional security and stability. But none of this happened. None of this happened at all. During this same period, I want to remind you that China was very hesitant to shape a political role for itself. Chinese scholars used to tell us at various meetings, oh, that are not familiar with the region, we have not been in the region for a long time, we don't know the language and culture and religion. So they used to tell us that you Indians should take the lead and we will support your initiative. So this is something, but I have noticed that over the last 10 years, Chinese expertise with regard to West Asia has expanded considerably. Many more scholars are available now who are pursuing higher studies in American and British European universities. They are learning Arabic, they are writing academic papers and books, not always of the best quality, but at least they are there. Similarly, in every Chinese university, you find centers for West Asian studies. My own friend used to be the director of the Center for Middle East Studies in Shanghai International University. And because of his success there, he was shifted 2 years ago to Fudan University, also in Shanghai, where he has set up a new center for Middle East studies. So all of this tells you how much effort China has made just over a 10-year period. They have specialized in the region and they are now confident enough to be able to announce publicly a role in the promotion of stability. Do recall here that the Beijing Accord of March 10 is a trilateral or tripartite accord in terms of which China is a party to the accord, and hence it's very clearly projected by the Chinese that they are going to be guarantors of the success of this accord.
So, is it a lack of capacity within the Foreign Office here that has resulted in this situation? Is it a lack of political direction,
See,
or
when
there's no direction?
I started writing about this only after I retired. But I engaged with my colleagues, both serving and retired, opinion used to be divided. Some of my colleagues felt that West Asia is too complex for us to get in, that we will get ourselves burnt. We are not if we are not appropriate role players there. I argued the opposite. I said that diplomacy is required in difficult circumstances. I don't need to be a diplomat with my friends. I need to be a diplomat in areas which are complex. And we have in house capacity. We have people with talent and expertise. But there is a reluctance. I want to point out to you that it's not just West Asia. Where have we ever sought to play a broader regional role? I use the term transactional and bilateral with regard to South Asia, with regard to West Asia, but isn't it also true that all the other relationships that we have, whether they are in South Asia or in Southeast Asia, they are also transactional and bilateral? For example, the absolute difficulty in promoting SARC. Now, I'm not going to waste your time in discussing what we could have done with regard to SARC, but the fact remains that SARC remains mortgaged to certain of our bilateral relationships. Take, for example, with respect to my friend BIMSTEC, would any one of us say beyond the rhetoric that anything significant has happened with regard to BIMSTEC? Take, for example, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, which is now about 30 years old. It started in 1994, and it was a very strong project, very strongly backed by India. They have had a lot of achievement with regard to economic cooperation, but there is nothing. We have shied away from maritime security. I have argued, and I have written a paper about that the time has come for us to revamp the Indian Ocean Rim Association, broaden its membership, and give it a deeper security role. Today, what has happened? I wonder if you noticed that we affiliated ourselves with Quad, then we have downplayed our role in Quad and are talking about technology cooperation, pandemic cooperation, and climate change. But have you noticed that under the umbrella of Quad, so many European naval forces have started entering the region, the Indian Ocean? The British are there. The French, of course, have been there because of their colonies. And now you have the Germans. Is this in India's interest? Is this something that we should have been enthusiastic about? That we have this concern, and I would say legitimate concern, with regard to the expanding Chinese footprint in areas of strategic importance to us. But the point is that you need a regional approach backed by a long-term vision and a substantial strategy. And when I say strategy, I mean resources, human, financial, technological, and also a time frame. That now, for example, Central Asia. Where do we have a vision for Central Asia? So it is not just South Asia, West Asia, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. To my mind, all of these regions could have done with a region-wide Indian strategic vision and game plan to consolidate our interests. We didn't do any of this. May I also remind you as I speak, others have not waited by the wayside. Today you have a very broad and substantial Chinese footprint all across Eurasia. I have said this several times and I say it again. Eurasia is an area of great strategic significance for India. You will see that West Asian countries are joining this. They have joined Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You find that Saudi Arabia and UAE want to join Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they also have indicated an interest in BRICS. These were areas with associations with which we were involved. Today we seem to have taken a back seat, not only in regard to institutions where we were already well placed. like IORA and BIMSTEC, and even with regard to West Asia, but otherwise also Central Asia, Eurasia in general, and BRICS and SCO. I'm not sure how enthusiastic our participation is.
Yeah.
What I am concerned about, I have no problem in a government enhancing its position before a domestic audience. But
Hmm.
foreign policy and domestic policy have to support each other. One
Yeah.
cannot be at the expense of the other. My concern is that we have today overwhelmingly committed ourselves to the reshaping of the idea of India at home without pursuing any serious foreign policy agenda with regard to the rest of the areas which are of importance to us.
So, just to sum up, then, India needs a vision and a game plan for its foreign policy. And from what I am told, there are also systemic gaps in our foreign policies capacities. Perhaps those are also the reason why we are not able to move forward, or perhaps there is even a lack of political direction. Whatever it is, India needs to get its act together. Ambassador Talmiz, as always, a pleasure talking to you. Great perspective and insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Surya. All good wishes to you.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media and Twitter. Thank you and good night.